Zoe Nguyen's shoulders ached from hunching over her laptop for the past 6 hours, but the spreadsheet for Caldera Maritime's holiday party budget wouldn't balance itself. As the newly hired event coordinator for Horizon Events, she'd been assigned the company's most prestigious client, though she'd yet to meet the elusive owner who apparently approved every detail personally. She glanced at the clock, 11:42 p.m. Another late night in the office with only the distant sounds of Seattle's port as company. Coffee break, Zoe muttered, stretching as she rose from her desk. The small kitchenette in Horizon's downtown office offered little beyond a coffee maker and some stale cookies, but caffeine was caffeine. She poured herself a cup, black and scalding, when the office door clicked open. A tall man with rain-dampened dark hair and broad shoulders stepped inside, looking as surprised to see her as she was to see him. His tailored peacoat couldn't hide the athletic build beneath, and despite the late hour, his jawline remained perfectly clean-shaven. "You must be burning the midnight oil," he said, his voice carrying a hint of gravel that suggested he hadn't used it in hours. Zoe clutched her coffee mug like a shield. "I could say the same to you. The office closed at 6. He smiled, the kind that created a single dimple in his right cheek. "I'm a friend of Marcus, just picking up some documents he left." Marcus was Zoe's boss, the owner of Horizon Events and a notorious workaholic who frequently forgot important items at the office. "Let me guess," Zoe said. "The Henderson contract." The man's eyebrows rose. "Good guess. Are you psychic or just observant?" "Neither." Marcus texted everyone on staff about it. "I'm Zoe, by the way, Zoe Nguyen. Kyle Calloway." He extended a hand that engulfed hers in a firm but gentle handshake. "Event planner, coordinator," she corrected. "Currently wrestling with Caldera Maritime's holiday budget." Apparently their boss wants an unforgettable experience but won't increase the budget to match. Something flickered across Kyle's face, amusement, perhaps. "Sounds challenging." "That's one word for it." Zoe sipped her coffee. "I've never even met the guy, but Marcus says he's particular." "I get the impression that unforgettable means miracle." Kyle leaned against the counter. "What's your vision?" The question caught her off guard. Most people didn't ask about her creative process. "For Caldera, I'm thinking of a winter harbor theme. The company deals with international shipping, so I want to incorporate that maritime heritage while still making it feel festive. A celebration of connections across oceans." She hadn't meant to reveal so much to a stranger, but something about Kyle's attentive gaze made the words flow easily. "That's actually brilliant," he said, the surprise in his voice genuine. "Have you shared this with Caldera yet?" "Presentation meeting tomorrow. First time meeting the executive team." Kyle checked his watch. "Then you should probably get some rest. First impressions matter." His concern seemed oddly personal for someone she'd just met. "The budget numbers need to work first." "Numbers can wait. Vision can't." He gestured to her coffee. "And that won't help you sleep." Zoe laughed despite herself. "Are you always this bossy with strangers?" "Only the ones working past midnight." His smile softened his words. "I look forward to seeing how your harbor concept develops." Before she could ask what he meant, he grabbed a folder from Marcus's office and headed for the door. "Good night, Zoe Nguyen. Don't stay too late." The door closed behind him, leaving Zoe staring at the space he'd occupied, wondering why the kitchenette suddenly felt emptier. The next morning, Zoe arrived at Caldera Maritime's gleaming headquarters overlooking Elliott Bay. The 40-story building dominated the waterfront, its glass exterior reflecting the gray December sky. Inside, the lobby boasted model ships in glass cases and navigation instruments that spanned centuries. "Miss Nguyen," a polished receptionist approached. "The executive team is ready for you in the compass room." Following her through security, Zoe tried to calm her nerves. She'd prepared meticulously, but this was her first solo presentation for a major client. The compass room overlooked the harbor, where container ships and ferries crisscrossed the water below. 8 people sat around a long table, but one chair at the head remained empty. Marcus introduced her to the team, ending with, "And our CEO should be joining shortly." Zoe began her presentation, explaining her concept for a Voyages and Celebrations theme that honored the company's global reach. She proposed transforming their headquarters' main event space into different port cities: Shanghai, Rotterdam, Singapore, New York, each with regional cuisine and decor that highlighted Caldera's international partnerships. The centerpiece would be a digital installation showing real-time positions of Caldera vessels worldwide, reminding everyone how your company connects the global economy, even during holidays, she explained, showing renderings on the presentation screen. She was discussing budget allocations when the door opened. The executive straightened as Kyle Calloway walked in. "Sorry I'm late," he said, taking the empty seat at the head of the table. "Traffic from the terminal." Zoe froze mid-sentence. Kyle, the man from last night, was Caldera Maritime's CEO. Miss Nguyen was just explaining the budget constraints of the vision she outlined, Marcus said smoothly. Kyle's eyes met hers, that same dimple appearing as he smiled. "Please continue, Miss Nguyen." "I'm particularly interested in how you'll make this unforgettable without exceeding our budget." Heat rose to her cheeks, remembering her complaints about the particular boss. "Of course, Mr. Calloway." She recovered quickly, detailing how strategic partnerships with vendors and creative repurposing of existing resources could create an extravagant experience without the extravagant price tag. Throughout, Kyle asked insightful questions that suggested he'd given the event more thought than most executives would. When she finished, he stood. "I appreciate your innovative approach, Miss Nguyen. You've clearly done your research on Caldera's operations. I'd like to discuss a few details further. Perhaps you could join me for lunch." Marcus looked surprised but pleased. "An excellent idea. Zoe can address any concerns directly." "Actually," Kyle said, "I'd prefer just Miss Nguyen. No offense, Marcus, but too many voices can complicate vision." Zoe found herself escorted to a private elevator that took them to a rooftop restaurant she hadn't known existed. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided a panoramic view of Puget Sound, the Olympic Mountains a distant silhouette beyond. "You didn't mention you were Caldera's CEO last night," Zoe said once they were seated. "You didn't ask," Kyle replied, his expression unreadable. "And you seemed stressed enough about impressing the particular boss." "I'm mortified." "Don't be. Your honesty was refreshing." He studied the menu. "Most people tell me what they think I want to hear, not what they really think." "Is that why you ambushed me with this lunch, to get more refreshing honesty?" He set down the menu. "I requested this lunch because your harbor concept is the first proposal that actually captures what Caldera means to me. You saw beyond the shipping containers and profit margins to the human connections we facilitate." His sincerity caught her off guard. "Thank you. That means a lot." "It should. I've rejected 5 event planners before you." Kyle's gaze was direct. "But there's a complication. Your budget won't work." Zoe's heart sank. "I calculated everything carefully. The budget's too small," he interrupted. "I'm doubling it," she blinked. "What?" "Your vision deserves proper funding. I want each international port to include cultural performances, not just food. I want the digital installation to be interactive. And I want to fly in employees from our major international offices." Zoe scribbled notes frantically. "That's extremely generous, but it's practical. This event isn't just a party, it's a statement about Caldera's future." His eyes held hers. "A future I'd like you to help shape, beyond this single event." Something in his tone made her pause. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Calloway?" "Kyle," he corrected. "And I'm suggesting we work closely on this project, very closely." The implication hung between them, neither professional nor entirely personal. Zoe chose her next words carefully. "I maintain professional boundaries with clients, Kyle." His smile returned. "As do I. But I also recognize exceptional talent when I see it. This project could be the beginning of a valuable partnership." Zoe relaxed slightly. "Then I look forward to exceeding your expectations." "You already have." Over the next 3 weeks, Zoe found herself in constant contact with Kyle. What began as formal meetings evolved into working dinners, late-night phone calls about last-minute changes, and text exchanges that occasionally strayed from party planning to personal interests. She learned that Kyle had inherited Caldera from his father, but had transformed it from a regional shipping company into a global maritime logistics empire. He spoke 4 languages, preferred sailing to motor yachts, and despite his wealth, drove the same Volvo he'd bought after college. Kyle learned that Zoe had studied art history before finding her calling in event coordination, that she volunteered teaching ESL classes on weekends, and that her Vietnamese grandmother had instilled in her an appreciation for creating meaningful gatherings. Events aren't just parties, she explained one evening as they finalized the menu. They sat in Kyle's office, takeout containers spread between ship manifests and budget sheets. They're experiences that connect people, memories in the making. Kyle watched her animated gestures with undisguised fascination. Is that why you work so hard on the details, creating memories? Partly, but mostly because details show you care, she hesitated. My father left when I was young. Every birthday he'd send expensive gifts but never remembered what I actually wanted. The price tag was high, but the thought was minimal. She hadn't shared this with many people and immediately regretted the overshare. Kyle's expression softened. That explains your insistence on personalized elements for each department. Everyone deserves to feel specifically valued, she said simply. The next day, a package arrived at her office, a rare art history book she'd once mentioned coveting but could never afford. The note reads simply, "Details matter. KC." Marcus noticed the growing connection between them. Be careful, Zoe, he warned after a planning meeting where Kyle had subtly rearranged the seating to place her beside him. Kyle Calloway is a good client but a complicated man. His last relationship ended badly when she accused him of being married to his company. We're working together, not dating, Zoe insisted, though the distinction felt increasingly blurred. He respects my professional input and looks at you like you hung the moon, Marcus replied dryly. Just remember who you're dealing with. Men worth hundreds of millions don't always play by the same rules. As the holiday party approached, Zoe found herself thinking about Kyle even when she shouldn't, wondering if his late nights at the office were as lonely as hers had been, if he ever took time to simply enjoy the empire he'd built. 2 days before the event, disaster struck. The digital installation company suffered a warehouse fire, destroying the custom hardware for the centerpiece. Zoe received the call at 6 a.m. and immediately contacted Kyle. I'll be at your office in 20 minutes, he said, his voice steady despite the crisis. We'll find a solution. They spent 14 hours brainstorming alternatives, calling in favors, and redesigning aspects of the event. By midnight, they'd salvaged the concept with a different execution, a projection mapping system that would transform the main hall into a living ocean, with ships that guests could launch via smartphone app. Exhausted, they found themselves alone in Kyle's office, the Seattle skyline glittering beyond the windows. We did it, Zoe said, collapsing onto his leather sofa. Crisis averted, Kyle sat beside her, closer than strictly necessary. You did it. I just made phone calls. Very expensive, persuasive phone calls, she smiled weakly. Money opens doors, but your creativity is what saved this event. He studied her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. You're remarkable, Zoe. I'm just doing my job. No, he said softly. Your job was to plan a party. You've created something meaningful, something that matters to me. The air between them seemed to thicken. Kyle leaned slightly forward, then stopped himself. It's late, he said abruptly, standing. I should get you home. Kyle, Zoe began, not sure what she wanted to say. The party is in 2 days, he interrupted. We need to be professional. The word landed like a barrier between them. Zoe nodded, gathering her things, trying to ignore the disappointment settling in her chest. The night of the party arrived with perfect December clarity, cold, but not freezing, the stars visible despite city lights. Caldera's headquarters had been transformed beyond recognition. Each international port occupied a different section of the main floor with authentic cuisine, music, and decor. Employees moved between Shanghai's red lanterns to Rotterdam's modernist installation, sampling food and sharing stories of global connections. Zoe, dressed in a deep blue gown that mirrored the digital ocean now flowing across the main hall's floor, watched with satisfaction as executives and dock workers alike marveled at the spectacle. The projection mapping tracked actual Caldera ships in real time, allowing guests to follow specific vessels or launch virtual messages to colleagues across the globe. "You've outdone yourself," Marcus said, appearing beside her with champagne. "I've never seen the Caldera team so integrated." "Executives are actually talking to logistics staff," Zoe smiled, searching the crowd. "Have you seen Kyle making his entrance in about 5 minutes?" He asked for a slight delay. Marcus raised an eyebrow, something about adding a final touch. When Kyle finally appeared, the room hushed. He wore a tailored suit that emphasized his athletic frame, but it was his confident presence that commanded attention. After welcoming everyone, he raised his glass. Caldera Maritime has always been about connections connecting continents, economies, and cultures. Tonight, thanks to Zoe Nguyen's extraordinary vision, we're connecting as people. His eyes found hers across the room. "To connections." The crowd echoed his toast, but Zoe barely noticed. Something in Kyle's expression made her heart race, a vulnerability beneath the confident exterior, a question in his eyes. As the evening progressed, they circled each other like planets in carefully calculated orbits, always in proximity but never quite connecting. Zoe attended to last-minute details while Kyle fulfilled his duties as host, but their gazes frequently met across the room. Near midnight, as the celebration reached its peak, Kyle appeared at her side. "Walk with me." He led her to a quiet balcony overlooking the harbor. Below them, the waters of Elliott Bay reflected city lights and stars alike. "The party exceeds every expectation," he said. "Everyone's talking about how it's transformed company morale." "I'm glad," Zoe replied, shivering slightly in the December air. Kyle removed his jacket, wrapping it around her shoulders in a gesture both gallant and intimate. The warmth of him lingered in the fabric. "I have a confession," he said, his voice low. "I knew who you were that night in your office." Zoe turned to face him. "What?" "Marcus had shown me your portfolio. I was impressed by your previous events and requested you specifically for Caldera." Kyle's expression was earnest. "I hadn't planned to visit that night, but I saw the light on and curiosity got the better of me. You pretended to be Marcus's friend." "A small deception. I wanted to meet you without the pressure of titles or expectations." He stepped closer. "I wanted to know if the woman behind the impressive portfolio was equally impressive in person." "And?" Zoe asked, her voice barely audible over the distant sounds of the party. "She was more than impressive. She was authentic, passionate, and unafraid to speak her mind to a stranger at midnight." His hand found hers, fingers interlacing. "I knew then that I wanted more than a holiday party from you." The confession hung between them, honest and vulnerable. "Kyle, let me finish," he said gently. "These past weeks working with you have been the most engaging of my professional life, but they've also shown me what's been missing in my personal life, someone who sees beyond the CEO, beyond the wealth, to what actually matters to me." Zoe's heart raced. "And what matters to you?" "Connections. Real ones." His free hand moved to her cheek. "The party ends tonight, but I don't want our connection to end with it." The moment stretched between them, professional boundaries on one side, personal possibility on the other. Zoe thought about Marcus's warning, about the complications of dating a client, about all the reasons to step back. Instead, she stepped forward. Their first kiss tasted of champagne and possibility, gentle at first, then deepening as Kyle's arms encircled her. When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. I've been wanting to do that since you explained your harbor concept, he murmured. Zoe laughed softly. That longer, since you called me particular without knowing who I was. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I'd like to take you to dinner tomorrow, not to discuss work, just us. I'd like that, she hesitated, but there are complications. You're still technically my client, Kyle nodded. For about, he checked his watch, 53 more minutes. Then the contract ends and I'm just a man asking a remarkable woman to dinner. A millionaire man, she corrected. Is that a problem? Zoe considered the genuine question. It could be. Your world is very different from mine. Different doesn't mean incompatible. His thumb traced her jawline. I've spent my life building connections between different worlds. I'd like to build one with you if you'll let me. The sincerity in his eyes made her decision easier than she'd expected. One dinner, we'll start there. One dinner became two, then weekly dates that explored Seattle's hidden gems. Kyle showed her secret viewpoints overlooking the Sound and introduced her to harbormaster friends who shared maritime legends. Zoe took him to underground art exhibitions and family-owned restaurants where her grandmother had taught her to appreciate authentic flavors. By spring, they were inseparable. Zoe had taken a position with a different event company to avoid conflicts of interest, though Caldera remained her favorite project. Kyle had delegated more daily operations to his executive team, making time for weekend sailing trips and cooking classes they took together. You've changed him, Kyle's sister Amanda told Zoe over lunch one day. He takes actual vacations now, calls me just to talk, not to discuss business. He's present in a way he hasn't been since Dad died. He's changed me too, Zoe admitted. I used to think success meant perfect execution of other people's visions. Kyle showed me the value of my own vision. In June, 6 months after the holiday party that had brought them together, Kyle invited Zoe for a private dinner aboard his sailboat. As they drifted in Elliott Bay, the setting sun painting the water in amber and gold, he seemed uncharacteristically nervous. Remember when you told me events are memories in the making? He asked, pouring wine with slightly unsteady hands. Of course. She watched him curiously. I've been thinking about the memories we've created and the ones I hope we'll make. He set down his glass and took her hands in his. Before you, my life was efficient but empty, full of successful ventures but devoid of meaningful connections. Zoe squeezed his hands encouragingly, her heart beginning to race. That night when you were working late, complaining about the particular CEO who wouldn't increase your budget, Kyle smiled at the memory. I recognized something in you that I needed in my life. Someone who sees details because they care, not because they're calculating advantage. He released her hands to retrieve something from his pocket, then knelt before her on the gently rocking boat. Zoe Nguyen, you planned one unforgettable night for my company, but you've given me an unforgettable future to look forward to. He opened the small box to reveal a sapphire ring the color of the ocean at dusk. Will you continue planning our future together as my wife? Tears welled in Zoe's eyes as the pieces fell into place, his careful attention to her interests, his questions about her family traditions, the way he'd integrated himself into her world as much as he'd welcomed her into his. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Zoe realized that the harbor concept she'd created for Caldera had become a metaphor for their relationship, a celebration of connections across different worlds, a bridge between separate lives that had found their way to each other. Their wedding the following spring took place on the waterfront where they'd first connected. In her vows, Zoe spoke of unexpected meetings and the courage to cross boundaries. In his, Kyle thanked her for seeing beyond his title to the man beneath. You planned a party, he concluded, voice thick with emotion, but you created a future, our future. 2 years later, as they welcomed their daughter Lily into the world, Kyle held the newborn with wonder. Another unforgettable event you've coordinated, he whispered to an exhausted but radiant Zoe. She smiled up at her husband. thinking of that first night in the office kitchenette, how a chance encounter had led to this moment. Some events, she murmured, plan themselves. Kyle leaned down to kiss her forehead, their daughter nestled between them. Not this one. You've been planning our family since the moment you imagined harbors connecting distant shores. His eyes, filled with love, met hers. Thank you for including me in your vision. Outside their hospital window, container ships moved silently across Elliott Bay, connecting distant worlds just as they had connected theirs.